Thanks again. So as many of you know now, my name is Burl Bryson, and I am the Executive Director of the Cannabis Alliance. What many of you don't know is that I come from a medical cannabis background. So about 20 years or so ago, I got involved in the medical market and was one of the early patients approved by Health Canada in Canada. And that process took about 2 years for me to push through. It was very difficult at that period of time to get a medical license in Canada. And from there, I began with an ethos of providing safe access to safe medicine for patients that really needed it. And since that time, that's really become my life's project and dedication. In 2015, I was lucky enough to participate in the, there was Measure 91 passed in the state of Oregon, and I became CEO of a cannabis company there that was medical and then transitioned to adult use after Measure 91. I see you back there, Adam. It was called Lunchbox Alchemy. It was a wonderful company full of wonderful people. We took care of patients. We provided medicine to patients, and we largely were known for our edible products, which are still famous to this day. I had an opportunity to come to this state and be CEO of a company called Smoky Point Productions, which is one of the larger producer processors in the state. Very focused on the retail side of things and not the medical side of things, but also a wonderful company full of wonderful people that was my pleasure to work with. Excuse me. And now I have an opportunity to become a real advocate, both for the industry of cannabis, but also for cannabis medicine. And so I'm really excited to be moderating this particular panel, especially with a few notable people up here that are not only wonderful people, but also good friends. So first of all, and you got a brief introduction on her earlier, is Dr. Sue Sicily, who is just a rock star. And I got to say, I'm a fanboy. So you are just such a wonderful person. And thank you so much for coming out here. I really appreciate that. For those of you who don't know, Sue got one of the first FDA approved double-blind studies approved for treatment-resistant PTSD in veterans. During the course of that study, she was forced to utilize cannabis, the only cannabis that was available at that time from the NIDA monopoly. If those of you who are not aware, the University of Mississippi has had the monopoly on producing any federally available cannabis. And they made it their policy to try to grow the worst weed possible. And they did a pretty good job at that, at being paid $1 million a year to grow bad weed. So Sue then went out and got a DEA license to federally produce cannabis for research. She is the only person in the country right now that's actively cultivating cannabis for research use for federal studies. And so we also have here John Kingsbury, who has become a friend of mine, and I have a ton of respect for, who's been working for a long time as a patient advocate and somebody that works their butt off for patients in this state. He's also taken on the mantle of home grow and carrying the flag for home grow in this state. For those of you who don't know, Washington is one of the few states that has adult use cannabis, where it is still illegal to grow plants that in your home. Not only is it illegal, but it's a felony. So Washington is still putting people in prison for nonviolent cannabis crimes today. That's still going on. The patient registry, and John, I'll ask to talk more about this, but the patient registry in this state has largely been broken, and patients largely go through the adult use for access to their medicine. And so a lot of times the home grow is dealing with patients. And so patients are being subjected to felony charges and all of the consequences that come with felony charges for producing their own medicine. So thanks, John. And I've got Jerry Whiting here, who is no, I don't have Jerry Whiting, do I? Yes, sorry. Like, you look, I need to get to know Jerry better. Clearly, we need to smoke a joint and commune a little bit. Do you make hashish? I smoke hashish. So that's awesome. You're the founder of LeBlanc One, and I look forward to getting more information. And then of course Matthew Friedlander, who is with Skagit Organics and a board member of the Cannabis Alliance, and a patient advocate and one of the few producer processors left in the state that's still producing cannabis medicine. So thank you very much, all of you. So I'll maybe give you all a little opportunity to say something a little bit more about yourselves. Or did I say it all? Okay, you got one right there.
Can you hear me? All right. So I think you said a lot of it. I became an authorized patient in 2009. Cannabis use for me before that was infrequent. I wasn't against it, but I did start using it again as medicine. And I came into activism. I am retired. So I came into activism during 2015 when we were discussing Senate Bill 5052. And what scared the hell out of me was that I realized that a lot of people, policymakers, were talking about people like me as though we were criminals. And one of the unfortunate things that I discovered is that well, we have decriminalized recreational use. We have gone on this course of recriminalizing medical use. And I think that's immoral. And I don't think it has to be that way. I have talked to patients from California and Colorado, and they feel like their systems are an asset to them. And patients in Washington State do not feel that way. So I don't mean to be a bummer, but the theme of this conference is moving forward. And I think in order to do that, one thing we need to be able to do is honestly assess where we are now and how we got there before we can make good choices about how to actually move forward. So
yeah, that's a really good point, and falling in line with our theme of foundations to futures. So we have to see where we came from, respect where we came from in order to build a better future for all of us. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Who's next?
My name is Jerry Whiting. I'm the founder and co-president of LeBlanc C&E. I began in, the illegal market as a kid my whole life. I had 3 kids. The older 2 developed a seizure disorder with the onset of adolescence. My middle son, Coleman, asked for help transitioning from pharma to cannabis. My response was, I don't know much about medical cannabis, but Martin Lee will stay with us during HempFest again. Marty and I go back to doing politics in Ann Arbor in the 70s. He's the head of Project CBD. Marty stayed with us for 6 days, left me a mason jar of Cannatonic. At the end of the week, I knew medical cannabis. So Coleman went on to, he was a shitty grower, but he ran 2 Eden machines at Green Lion. I could grow and began to make medicine. And I still do tinctures, topicals, and other. 3 years ago, I changed my focus from cannabis with THC to hemp without. I still make medicine. I still have an interest. I still work with Project CBD. But now it's all about hemp, both for medicine and fiber and electronic components and a bunch of other stuff. And I'll stop there because I could go on way too long. Oh, but my thesis, my guiding thing is going back to when I practiced acupuncture in Boston in the 80s. Healthcare is a right, not a privilege. And to that end, my family and friends scream at me because they claim that I share too much. Honestly, I understand the sentence structure. I don't know what that means. So we do a lot of pro bono work. And that's the way it should be because our medical system is broken. So I see hemp and cannabis along with mushrooms and a lot of other plants filling the gap from this deconstructionist pharmaceutical model into an earth-centric plant-based medicine, which we all know is decentralized, defunds big pharma, and works better.
Hello, my name is Matthew Friedlander. I'm one of the owners of Skagit Organics. As Burl said, we are a licensed processor here in Washington. We specialize in food grade extractions, specifically for the purpose of creating RSO. It's a unique style of oil that is very sought after for its medicinal healing properties by medical cannabis patients and recreational consumers alike. I've also been a massage therapist, licensed massage therapist for 20 years. My education formally, my interest in education and natural medicine began formally in 1998 when I went to massage school in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That education has helped inform and shape my vision for Skagit Organics. We have been dedicated to ensuring that there is medical grade cannabis products available for people in Washington's recreational regulated market. To the point of this panel, we have also started 2 other companies that allow us to offer more products and services to patients because the rules for I-502 cannabis companies are so restrictive. So we've started a hemp company called Skagit Naturals that allows us to sell CBD and CBG versions of RSO to people in Washington and outside of the state. And we've also started another, our newest company, Skagit Wellness, that offers free patient services. We offer free access to Department of Health certified medical cannabis consultants so that they can get the education and information that they need when they're looking to incorporate cannabinoid supplements into their wellness program.
I'm Sue Sicily. I'm an internal medicine physician from Scottsdale, Arizona. And I'm gonna speak after, so I don't want to spill all the goodies yet. So I'm just gonna highlight a few points that I'm not going to be able to address in my talk, and I want to see if we can maybe bring it up in the panel. I was fortunate to be able to work with my mom for 20 years in medical practice, which is an incredible gift, and we took care of mostly military veterans, first responders, and Native American tribes over telemedicine. So one of the things I was going to bring up is we were talking about how Washington might be able to fortify the medical side of the program a little bit more. And I wanted to tell you about one model in terms of advancing the veterans cause and how hard it is for them to get a medical certification. You know, a lot of these guys absolutely need a medical card in order to be maintained on their prescriptions. If they test positive in a clinic visit, then they get stripped of they won't get their prescriptions renewed a lot of times. So the medical card does offer protection. There's a national directive in the VA hospital system that says the VA is not allowed to punish veterans if they show a legal card from their state program. So I bring it up because Illinois actually managed to pass or create a system, a workaround for veterans where they could go to all they do is send their medical records and their DD-214 directly to the state health department. And they look through the records and verify if they have a qualifying condition. So I think that might be, it's turned out to be a good solution in Illinois. And I don't know if you probably don't need to go through the legislature. It should be an administrative change within your health department, but it's just something I wanted to raise because it didn't open the floodgates. It wasn't like some, the fears that all these legislators had. It actually is really providing legitimate access to veterans who would otherwise maybe stay underground, because they're afraid to. So anyway, just something I can provide the language. I think it'd be a really neat program for the Alliance to work on as a group, maybe to meet with your regulators and ask them to create, because we're trying to replicate this in other states. So, and then the only other two subjects I wanted to mention to you guys I wanted to see if we could talk about the final frontiers with cannabis as a medicine that we haven't tackled yet. I feel are trying to finally get this material into the nursing home, hospice environment. We're trying so hard to create, to build relationships with these groups in all different states. They keep citing their, the fact that they take Medicaid and Medicare dollars and they can't, but in fact they can. And there are a lot of for-profit hospices that might be willing to work with you on that, because they're all trying to distinguish themselves and create a name for themselves as being more progressive, more empathic. So something I wanted to work on with you, and then also to talk about the buy-in with the 12-step community, with the AA, NA groups. We desperately need these folks to stop vilifying cannabis and start viewing it as the exit drug that we all know it is. So I'm hoping that there's a way, if we make a concerted effort in the next year to start, working with these groups. The leaders of these groups need to to see the data and stop, trying to attack their members who dare to use cannabis as to cross taper off more addictive drugs. That they need to look at the science and look at the mountain of anecdotal data. So that's all I wanted to throw out there.
Excellent. Thank you. And so I actually am really interested in that, Sue. I'll follow up with you on that and see if we can organize something in Washington to make sure that veterans are protected as well for their cannabis use. And I love that you're talking about the future of the way cannabis medicine could be in the state of Washington. John, I'm going to ask you for a little background on, if you can, sort of, and lots of folks don't know, kind of the state of the registry right now. How robust it was prior to adult use legalization to I-502, and then what it entails right now. How hard is it for somebody to get on the registry? Because I know you've done a lot of work on this.
There's a lot. Excuse me. So there's a lot to unpack there. And so let me give you a brief history of how I see the legal status of patients. In 1998, by a pretty healthy margin, the voters of Washington State said, we're not comfortable with recreational use or growing or just the recreational use of cannabis. But we do recognize that for people who are particularly struggling, who have a qualifying condition, who are receiving care under the treatment of a doctor, and that doctor recommends their use of cannabis to relieve their suffering, it's common sense that there needs to be a safe harbor for those patients. And there was no particular way to access it. And, there were a lot of weaknesses in that approach, but I think the moral statement that medical cannabis is a no-brainer for some people was clear. By the time we got to 2015, what happened is, and this particularly stands out at me, the director of LCB, who was lobbying for 5052, declared that 90% of all medical patients are fake, that it was just a way to get weed. And so what you see there is a tremendous respect for patients in 1998 that really planted the seeds for the industry that a lot of you are participating in today. And by 2015, we became criminals and fakers, and our doctors were lying. And the system that they built on that is reflected in the solutions, if you want to call them that they came up with for us. And the criminalization, the recriminalization of patients has resulted in the state of affairs that we have today. So what happened in 2015 is they said, we're going to kind of recriminalize you, but here's some things we're going to give you. You're going to have medical grade cannabis. You'll have some legal protections. They will protect your privacy if you join the registry. So almost none of those things have appeared. And I think what's happened, it's very clear to me that in this state, even more than others, a tremendous number of patients, I'm guessing 42 to 49%, do not participate in the regulated market for the most part. I got to be honest, I rarely buy from legal stores. They're convenient, they're all around me, they have dozens of choices on the shelf, but they don't meet my needs. And it's not just a price thing. I can get cheaper weed in the weed store, but the products aren't appropriate. And what LCB and a lot of legislators have said is just suck it up and go buy your high THC rec weed. Well, if you're medically suffering and you have requirements, that doesn't work for you. You can't just take a couple aspirins and call them in the morning, which is sort of what that is. I have polled patients since 2017, and I was surprised by the results. One of the results was that the biggest concern that patients had, I thought it was going to be prices. I thought it was going to be excise tax. I thought it was going to be all sorts of things. What has been consistent from poll to poll is that patients fear their legal status. They fear when they get their card that that's going to make them more of a target than it is to protect them. And that is not only untenable, it's immoral. And so what we've seen is a lot of patients have to go to the illicit market to get their needs met, which is absolutely contrary to what the citizens were going for in 1998. The other thing too is I want to talk about this fear is not only reflected in my polls, but it's also highly reflected in the registration rate in this state. Colorado, which has very liberal policies, has home grow, which you would think would suppress the registration rate because patients wouldn't need to necessarily register to grow. Their registration rate is about 88 to 90,000 citizens per year. Washington State probably has 9,500 to 11,000. For some reason, our registration system is like our traceability system was. We don't know how many patients we have at a given time. We're the only state like that. So, but the point is we have 1/10 the registration rate as Colorado, and we have 2 million more citizens. And I think that's a really good indicator of the non-buy-in of patients from this state. And so we have to ask, where are they going? And I can tell you, they're going to the illicit market. A lot of them are going back on pills. Some say, I'm going to have to go back to pills. And some of them are buying whatever product they can get in the store. And I don't think that's moral, and I don't think it's good public health policy. And I think that we can do better. And I think the starting point for that is saying our medical system should be based on compassionate care as opposed to patients are lying and their doctors are lying and patients are faking it. And so that's my little soapbox speech. Does that answer your way?
It does. Thank you. Thank you. I think a lot of people don't know that history or background on what has happened to the medical system in this state. And I also want to just tell you how much I love your t-shirt and that cannabis is safer than pharma. Thank you. And so I think most of you know, but a lot of people don't, that hemp and cannabis are actually the same exact species of plant. It's Cannabis sativa L. And so, Jerry, maybe talk a little bit more about hemp as medicine and your experience with that.
So you're right. It's like making Chihuahuas illegal and German Shepherds legal. They can interbreed. The distinction, I mean, really. So it's an arbitrary,
With the stool.
I'm not getting the visualization. Don't make me happy. So no, really. So Cannabis sativa L to me is one bucket. You can talk about indica hybrid sativa, that's BS. Those are adjectives that describe the effect, not botanical descriptions by and large. Number two, the 0.3% line in the sand between hemp, which is legal federally and okay, and cannabis with more than 0.3 THC is arbitrary and was never meant to be a firm Berlin Wall iron curtain. You can breed hemp with pot. So I wrote a piece in Northwest Leaf, and I'm doing a larger version where I talk about hemp as being a chemical factory. Project CBD, which I'm a part of, talks about the power couple, THC and CBD. Excuse me, but we know that there are, 100 or so cannabinoids, a couple hundred terpenes. I'm a big fan of anthocyanins and flavonoids and a bunch of other stuff, triterpenoids. My point being, cannabis sativa L is this God's gift of a chemical cocktail. And the various cultivars present a multidimensional formulation that addresses a wide variety of, a wide variety of conditions. Some of them recreational, some of them medicinal and recreational, and some of them more medicinal. When we remove cannabis sativa L in all incarnations from the Schedule I list and make it all legal across the country with no regard to state lines, then we can have a conversation. So why is hemp such a big deal? Well, I'm growing a cultivar in New Mexico, in Eatonville with Hunter and Reich Farms. Travis is here, and I'm working with the Yakima, as I mentioned, and this is all from NEO. So NEO is Nebraska Hemp for Victory, from a farm in Nebraska that's been growing since the Second World War. So we know it's a fiber cultivar crossed with Harley Sue. So it's got marketable amounts of CBD and terps. So I'm, the Yakima see this as a fiber plant. I look at it as fiber, medicine, because it has cannabinoids and terpenes. I use the root to make topicals, and I have for 10 years because of 2 triterpenoids in there. The first thing is to make the plant legal so that we aren't restricted to governor's whims, South Dakota, and people in Texas, and holding up how people use the plant. So I can grow barley and I can raise yeast without a federal permit license or the USDA looking up my butt, So we need to normalizing cannabis sativa L, not just hemp, means letting a farmer add it to their rotation without jumping through hoops. But the real deeper level of normalizing hemp and cannabis begins with 4-H, the Grange, your county extension agent. So I'm an old revolutionary. I've done a bunch of political work. My last battle is taking on big ag. There are 6 seed companies that determine what is grown, what we eat, what we wear. I'm sick and tired of glyphosate and Roundup. The good news is a lot of it comes from Russia and Ukraine, and the prices have made it prohibitive for farmers to continue to poison what they grow. And so I'm working with Black farmers in the South and tribes all over to get them to do another kind of farming. And I've taken on conventional ag because it is one of the largest reasons we have climate change. They've washed the topsoil away. There's fewer cultivars being grown. They do monoculture across counties and states, which diseases and pests love. And the 800-pound gorilla nobody wants to acknowledge is not only are farmers in debt to the bank, they don't own their farms or their tools. Farm suicides, nobody wants to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about it. I do. I don't live in the grain belt, and I've never been on a tractor, and I didn't vote for Trump. But I have compassion as a human being for the people who live in debt to the banks and at the whim of seed companies and chemical companies. There's a reason, Bayer bought Monsanto. They can get you sick and they can sell you medicine. It's a vicious cycle. So for me, again, I look at, and I just sent Marty this paper to look at this thing about hemp is a chemical factory. So here's the deal. When I win the lottery, I'm going to start, I have a huge seed collection. I just gave half to the USDA seed bank. The idea would be that people, the outliers are us. Of those cannabinoids, terpenes, and other things, all people want is how much THC can I get for $10? Or how much CBD is in that preparation? That is a two-dimensional flat model. So CBG is getting its, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff. So I would say, let's cast a wide net, do tissue culture, store this stuff until someone figures out what it's good for. Why? Because extinct is forever. I also wrote, at the request of DJ Short, a licensing schema called the Cannabis Breeders' Rights, which has been used by growers in the Emerald Triangle for the last 6 years. And I set up 27 different conditions that cover propagation, commercialization, attribution, et cetera, et cetera. And so my fear is there are some magic beans out there that Monsanto and Syngenta and Archer Daniels Midland and all these big ag people they want to own it. They want to own it. I got news for you. Nowhere in the book of Genesis does it talk about private property, intellectual property rights, and patents on apples, bananas, cherries, and pot. So you know there's going to be a land grab, which is why I gave my collection to the USDA, because Zachary, who runs it, is like on our side. He's on our side. He's one of us. So I'm going to stop now, but this is like a really, really, really big deal. Extinct is forever. The plant holds great promise. And you know, all these pharma companies and ag companies have a skunk work projects or two in the back room that their R&D, they want to own this. They want to own our plant. They want to own our healthcare. They want to own our food. Hell no.
Thank you. Thank you. Mic drop. Yeah. So one of the things that I loved about growing up in the medical cannabis community was that it was a ground up. It was people caring for other people. Big companies were out of it. And it was about respecting the plant, and the plant is our first medicine. I love that you brought up Genesis. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. Genesis 1:21. 1:29. Yep. God gave all seeded plants to mankind for their use as medicine. This was the primary seeded plant that was in use at that time. Food, fiber, fuel, and medicine. Awesome. Thank you. Matt, so tell us a little bit about, first of all, a little bit more about Skagit Organics and some of your CBG and other beneficial cannabinoids that you're working on, but also what it's like to be a medically endorsed producer or processor in this system that we have right now.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, we specialize in food grade extraction. So we're using food grade alcohol to make our products. We operate from a standpoint of simplicity. We're a very low technology company. We have pretty minimal equipment. We try to process the plant in the most minimal way possible that we can. There's always just two ingredients that go into making our oil. It's alcohol and cannabis. We purge out the alcohol and you're left with an oil that is somewhere in the 50 or 60% cannabinoid range. So one of the most unique things about RSO, and this is because we use food grade alcohol, the chemical properties of alcohol want to pull a lot of things out of the plant alongside the cannabinoids. So you end up with a plant with an oil that has a lot of beneficial plant constituents, proteins and fats, and a lot of chlorophyll, which is why the RSO is so dark. That adds to the healing potential of the cannabinoids themselves. So while there are many, as you said, hundreds of different cannabinoids, we believe that the presence of those beneficial plant constituents really makes the oil unique. If THC was the end all be all, everyone would be curing themselves with 99.9% THC isolate. That's not what we see happening. So, yeah, we have started to also incorporate CBD and CBG into our products as well. So we actually work with Travis at Hunter and Reich Farms as well. So we do some extractions with his hemp material. And we are able to make a CBD or CBG dominant version of RSO as well. Very distinct reactions, or they have effects. They give very distinct effects from the different cannabinoids. So CBD tends to be reported as being generally very relaxing and sedative, and CBG is a much more uplifting effect for people. And yeah, we are one of the only companies in the state that does DOH testing on our products. So the Department of Health medical testing. Until April of this year, Washington didn't even require pesticide testing. So we started voluntarily pesticide testing back in 2017, I believe. And then about a year and a half ago, we decided to go to the next level and test our products for heavy metals as well. So now we've got one of the only DOH products on the market.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, so thank you. And so as many of you may or may not be aware, it's October 1st. So this has been a rule change that's been happening since April. There was a grandfather period when untested cannabis could still be sold to dispensaries in the state. As of today, that's no longer true. So it is still possible to buy untested cannabis from dispensaries until the end of this year. But as of right now, it can no longer be sold to dispensaries. So we're making progress. It's slow, but we're getting there. And so I'm very thankful for that. So, one of the things that came up earlier, Sue, when we were talking was some of the stuff around high potency cannabis. And, as we're talking to John about the fact that the medical system in this state is broken, and we hear Representative Kloba talking about, upcoming legislation, which is potentially going to limit the THC content of cannabis in this state. Can you talk a little bit about, kind of what that means, and a little bit about the research as well that we're kind of talking about that a lot of this stuff is based on?
Right. The government has done such a good job of systematically impeding cannabis research over so many decades that it's very difficult to find data to oppose these THC caps. This is a big challenge for us. We're seeing THC caps popping up in all different states now. It's a new tactic of Kevin Sabet, Project Sam, Drug Free America. All the prohibitionists are still trying to maneuver. They weren't able to block these ballot initiatives. So they've created another strategy, which is go in the legislature, work with ALEC and those groups and create model legislation to insert into different legislative sessions all around the country. So we've been a target, Arizona, we've had 4 years of THC caps that have threatened our state at like 2% THC. And he was the Speaker of the House who just recently got unelected, but it's a huge concern. And it also sadly ends up, this also happened in Florida, in West Virginia, we're dealing with. So we're trying to, it's like whack-a-mole here. We're trying to shut these down wherever we can, but the data is hard to find because the cannabis, like Burl was saying earlier, the cannabis that we've been forced to use from University of Mississippi all these years was about 7-8% THC. Most recent, I think we got 9% THC flower in our last round of studies. But point is that they're using that to say, well, we've never studied anything like what's in the stores now. And one of the interesting tactics, it just came, the budget bill. I don't know if you guys remember hearing about when Biden signed the recent budget bill, it included language that said that researchers can now use dispensary cannabis for studies, right? And so I know everybody thought, wow, this sounds like a victory for sure, finally. But then when you looked at the actual fine print of the legislation, it said that it could only be used for driving safety studies. So what they're doing very purposefully is going to expose people. This was a Project Sam tactic. They're going to make sure that they give patients, so they're going to have access now to 90% THC oil. They're going to make, these study subjects dab this high potency oil and then stick them in a driving simulator, which happens right in the real world all the time. We take a dab and then jump in the car and, I'm just like, come on. But that's what they're doing because they want to guarantee that they can thwart the data from driving safety, which haven't been favorable to them, right? The driving safety studies mostly have shown that the harm is not obvious. Sure, there's been some uptick in DUIs and stuff in Colorado and things, but not as severe as they would like. So they're gonna, and if you go into a driving simulator and you are super high, you are not going to do well, of course. So this is a big problem. It's really sad to me that we couldn't have expanded that law. We could have talked to electeds at the federal level and asked them to make sure all clinical trials could have dispensary cannabis. That's our dream, right? That we want to be able to use real world cannabis in trials, but unfortunately that did not happen. So be prepared. You're probably going to see over the next few years driving safety studies that are going to be so out of whack with reality. It's very concerning. And if you see anything at the state level, certainly you definitely want to try to block that. Yeah.
Excellent. Can you also speak, we were talking a little bit earlier about sort of these studies and the causative effects that's been found between high potency cannabis and psychosis.
Right. Yeah. So this is another, layer of their strategy is to make sure they keep tying in cannabis and psychosis, which they know is a real phenomena. We can't deny there are a small minority of patients that do develop psychosis. It's usually short-lived, it's mild and dissipates on its own in our lab. It is not what they're trying to describe, which is cannabis leads to schizophrenia. It's not chronic psychosis. It's a brief, self-limited experience that is, doesn't require medical intervention. So it's a real challenge because the studies that are being done, that's why I tried to raise this morning with your legislator, and it's on all of us here in this room. We have got to monitor the situation. If you guys are lucky enough to get research money in this state, make sure you ask at every turn. You can't just ask one time because these guys change the priorities very quickly. You've got to stay on them and ask exactly what criteria are being used to ship out this research money. Typically, the monies end up going to like slush funds for these universities to just waste it on totally esoteric research. I was telling them that, I've seen, some of this money going to study whatever CBN in rat amygdalas, the tiny part of the brain. And I mean, great, it's fascinating, but I'm just saying for you guys, we've come so far. It's time for human trials. We cannot allow this money to do anything except go into studying how humans are affected. We don't need rats. We don't need test tubes anymore. We need to go straight to humans. If she's mentioned about cancer research, great. Let's administer your cannabis to cancer patients in the real world and document how they're reacting to this and not keep doing all this, studies that aren't meaningful to our day to day. But the psychosis issue is really problematic because what they're doing is just they're doing retrospective chart reviews where they go back and they look at, okay, this person coded for cannabis use disorder, and they also presented to the ER with psychosis. So they count all those numbers, and suddenly you've got thousands of patients who had cannabis and psychosis, but they failed to acknowledge that a lot of these people came in with polysubstance use. They were on, they don't mention that they were also tested positive for PCP and alcohol and all this stuff. So I just want you to do as much as you can to question these trials, to keep asking questions, to force them to examine that these studies aren't a direct causal relation. It's impossible to make those leaps. And then to make sure that if you're lucky enough to get government money for research, that you are really careful about how the language is crafted for this RFP process. It should be a competitive RFP with an open selection committee. That's another thing we see in other states, that they do this in the background in a closed process where no public input is allowed. You got to change that. You got to be able to have, force them into abiding by open meeting laws, getting a say on where that money goes, who, which researchers are getting it, so it doesn't end up in the hands of people with sort of nefarious interests to make cannabis look bad. And then you gotta just make sure that that you write the priorities so that it definitely defines that it's going to go to human studies, looking at whatever issues you care about. I mean, you could set up, there's so many illnesses that have never been properly studied yet. I know, like, we're trying to prioritize in Arizona study on cannabis for autism, which we got tons of moms that report benefit, but we don't have a single randomized controlled trial yet to verify that. So it's just whatever you can do to advance the scientific movement by target, like insomnia studies. My God, everybody is using cannabis for insomnia that I know, but we've never had a good randomized, the gold standard. I'm talking about not just observational studies, survey data, but if you're going to put millions of dollars into research, you should shoot for the gold standard randomized control trial if you're going to really move the needle on public policy. So.
That's excellent. I really look forward to working with you directly and working with our legislature and trying to siphon off some of the $500+ million a year that cannabis is adding to the state coffers for real research to study the beneficial effects of cannabis instead of to try to vilify cannabis. So that's awesome. Thank you. We're running a little low on time, so I'm sure there are some questions out there, and I forgot how old I am and how much this hurts. Hi, Sean.
Hi, thanks for being up there. I'd like to hear the panel's opinions, discussions about the activity that we've seen recently in Washington State, to where CBD oil from hemp was allowed into the 502 market, and then labs started converting it into synthetic THCs. As I'm sure a lot of you know, that really devastated the farmers that grew for extraction purposes, and it had a huge economic benefit or economic downturn to those that had to close, and then a huge economic benefit to the labs that were doing this conversion. So what are your thoughts on synthetically made THC?
Teacher, call on me. So the problem is that we have an artificial distinction between cannabis on one side and hemp on the other. In an unliberated territory where there is no rec or medical market, the vacuum is filled by people who in mini marts, gas stations, and kiosks in the mall that sell whatever. This is bad public health. There's no health involved. And isomerization, so flipping the molecules from one to the other is not 100% process. It's not trivial science. And it's not that I have anything against, Delta 8 or what have you, But if it isn't 100% conversion, what's the other that's in the bottom of the test tube? And quite honestly, there was a panel that the Cannabis Alliance had. Joy was on it and the dude from UW. Do you remember this? Where's Joy? Yeah, and we talked about this. The deal is, if you look at cannabis sativa L as one chunk, there are cultivars that make what you want. But we have this legal construct that says that hemp is good and pot is bad. Cannabis sativa L is all okay. So remove the economic incentive and you get pure multidimensional chemical cocktails. If you want to get stoned, THC or Delta, eat it and get Delta 11. I don't really care, but to force consumers with the legitimate demand to go to the illegal market or the gas station to buy a cartridge that they hope gets them stoned and doesn't kill them is an unreasonable situation. So just legalize it, for God's sake. Tax it however you want, but you're incentivizing questionable and sometimes criminal activities. You're jeopardizing consumer health, and it's just not right.
Thank you. Yeah, agreed.
What he said.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up, because I was going to get to it and then Caitlin cut me off. So I'm glad you got to it, Caitlin. So, yeah.
Well, it seems to me from what I saw that what they were getting was psychoactives. And it seems to me that the market's already flooded with THC and psychoactives. So I don't think that the need is there. The word I kept hearing through lobbying was innovation. That was the word. And I thought, well, getting stoned's not really an innovation. And right? And let's be honest what it was. It was saying, we want to use a plant that's less restricted in the market with no canopy that just costs us cheaper to make. That was what the innovation was. It was a way to escape regulation. And I'm not opposed to experimenting, but again, what's that other 15% at the bottom of the test tube? I want to know, particularly as a patient, and I don't think anything like that should be on the market unless we have basic answers to the question. But the only innovation there was just how manufacturing was cheaper and escaped regulation. But I don't have a problem finding things that get me high, so I don't really need it.
Yeah. And that's not even starting to talk about things like chirality and isomerization and all. There's a lot of bad stuff that can happen. So, I look at it as we've spent 100 years getting this natural plant to a legalization status. And in a matter of a couple of months, we've got a completely unregulated Delta-8, other synthetic cannabinoids that are occurring and being sold with zero regulation. There's, all of us invested so much time and so much money in building out our businesses and staying within this regulated market and trying so hard to provide safe and effective medicine. And then to have the federal government go, oh, well, just all these untested cannabinoids that are out there that made by people in their bathtubs or garages or wherever, adulterated with whatever products, are now legal in every gas station to every child that can walk in and get them, to me is a certain level of insanity.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's
Hopefully so.
It's unfortunately what happens when you create rules and regulations without taking input from people who actually know and deal with the thing you're trying to regulate and make rules about. You've got to work with people from the industry. Otherwise, you end up with things like this.
Agreed. Yeah.
Again, just to piggyback on the tribal innovation side of thing, I was really, really excited when I was doing my research on the Puyallup tribe and the work that they were doing. They got their Medicine Creek analytics, but they also have their Queville naturopathic facility. And when they were doing some of their early research with a naughty partner, Stanford University, they actually took some of the intellectual property from that research and filed patent on the THC molecules that they were researching in partnership with the tribe. And so the tribe filed suit against Stanford University in regards to this early research on this proprietary molecule within THC that helps with pain. And so now I'm just like follow-up status for me on what happened with that whole case. But tribes, innovation, research partnerships, just planting some seeds there. But my question specifically is in regards to Skagit and the work that you guys are doing on the hemp derived medicinal products. Are you seeing mostly like retail storefront, or is your big presence on the online marketing? Because I know that patient sensitivity around acquiring this medicine is still very much a high bar. And I work with a lot of elderly patients doing cultural enrichment through American Cruise Lines, which is really, really interesting. American Cruise Lines, I find myself when they're doing my culture, and then I talk to them about what I do in the cannabis industry. And then the line just, do you have any samples? Do you have any products with you? But I realized that hemp is that safe space for tribes to come in the conversation on the CBD. I'm noticing that as well, just mainstream with elders in general. So I'm curious on the purchaser side, are you seeing mostly those products being purchased in like an online retail space or on the recreational storefront with the hemp side of products?
Yeah. Most of our sales on the hemp side of things come through the website online. But Washington does allow retail stores that have a medical endorsement to carry hemp products that are less than 0.3% THC. So there are some stores in the state that you could walk into and buy one of our Skagit Naturals hemp products that's going to be CBD or CBG dominant with less than the 0.3% THC. But yeah, most of it's online. I think there's 5 or 6 stores in the state that carry our hemp brand as well as our cannabis brand. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. That's all the time we have. Sue, I'm going to ask you to stay there. Awesome. Thank you.